let's go through, we'll do a round of introductions. What I can say is the topic that we picked tonight was building a bigger business the second time around. And so everyone on the panel here was someone that I've considered both a friend and a mentor, and I've turned to for business advice over the years. Really just an incredible group of individuals. And what we're going to do is have just kind of a discussion tonight on what helped them make them successful the first time and what lessons they take into their second businesses, and how those lessons can help all of us in this room here today. So just to give you a sense of who all we're talking to, if you are currently running your own company or plan to start your own company in the next 6 months, raise your hand. Okay? So you can see about half the room in here are entrepreneurs. If you have already raised an angel round anywhere up to $500,000, raise your hand. And if you raise venture capital north of $1 million, raise your hand. All right, so you can kind of get a sense, if you're currently an investor, either an angel or venture capitalist, raise your hand. All right, and so our goal tonight is to help connect everybody here. So without further ado, why don't we jump into introductions? And one thing I can say is nothing here was pre-planned. I've actually had a couple people on both this panel and previous panels ask me for the questions ahead of time. And I always say I don't actually come up with any questions until I'm here. So this is really just a discussion that we're all part of, and a little bit later on we'll open it up so that you all can ask questions as well too. So without further ado, Gil, why don't you jump on in?
Sure, this works, all right. This is great. Thanks a lot for inviting me to this. I'm Gil Elbaz. I'm founder and CEO of Factual. My quick story is I came back to LA from Silicon Valley because this is the place to start a company. I came back in '97. I started Applied Semantics in '98. It was an incredible roller coaster. The end of that story was in 2003, got acquired by Google. Incredible experience there, but I couldn't wait to get back in the game again, so I left in 2007 to start Factual.
And just so everyone knows, Applied Semantics turned into...
Well, we had a product called Applied Semantics AdSense. And
so if any of you use or have clicked on AdSense at any point in your life, you're in all essence watching the founder of AdSense right here.
Right. So Applied Semantics was about 40 some odd people when we got acquired in 2003. I certainly am very proud that now, if you look at the financials, it's something like $10 billion a year. Of course, having Google behind that made a little bit of a difference.
And your sales agreement was 10% profit sharing.
I think there's royalties in there something, right? Yeah. And so I couldn't wait to get into it again. So Factual provides data to developers so developers can innovate more quickly, they can build cooler apps. We can't say that we understand what's cool in app land. We're just the data guys, and we provide data as a service. For example, Facebook came to us to get local data so they could build Facebook Places and compete with Foursquare. Come check it out.
And just so as a frame of reference, how much money have you raised for Factual? I think it's public, right?
Yeah, the Series A that was in December was a $25 million Series A with Andreessen Horowitz and Index Ventures leading, and also Mark Suster, very happy that he was also involved with GRP.
Thanks. Brian?
Well, thanks so much for having me here, Jason, and great to see all these aspiring entrepreneurs and some VCs.
I would say it with such disdain.
I'm Brian Lee. My background is I grew up in Southern California, went to UCLA for undergrad and law school. After graduate law school, I worked at a firm called Skadden Arps, Slatemore and Flom, downtown. And while I was there, I came up with the LegalZoom.com idea, basically kind of automating legal services, kind of offering that service online. This was back in March of 2001 when we launched it. Didn't raise any capital for the business because there was no capital to be had. So I took a loan from my parents. My partner, Brian Liu, who I started the company with, took a loan from his. We started out of my condo and just kept growing it. Kind of fell into paid pay-per-click very early at LegalZoom. We were the 8th advertiser in the world to use pay-per-click advertising when there were 1 cent clicks. So it was a beautiful time to be in a PPC. About 8 years into LegalZoom, I just started getting the itch again to start something. Came up with this ShoeDazzle.com kind of soft subscription e-commerce model and just couldn't get it out of my head. With my wife, actually, who was my inspiration to start ShoeDazzle. So started that about 2 years ago now, just over 2 years. And it's been doing pretty well. We're having a lot of fun, and I always tell people it's a lot more fun selling sexy women's shoes than divorces and corporations. I'm having a lot of fun doing it. Thank you for having me.
And doing sort of well is probably the understatement. Shoot House is probably the fastest growing company in Southern California, absolutely just doing amazing. And for any of you that think that you have to stay a domain area expert, Brian is a good person to say that you can go from legal to high fashion, and it works out just fine. Mark?
Well, let's see. AdSense, LegalZoom, ShoeDazzle. I created 2 businesses nobody's ever heard of in very unsexy spaces. The first was in construction. The second was in document management for salespeople. And I sold both companies. The first was based in Europe. Sold it to a French publicly traded company called the Sword Group. The second was in Silicon Valley, and I sold that to Salesforce.com. Before I went off to Europe and eventually started a company, I lived in Los Angeles. So like you, I left and ended up coming back. I came back in 2007, moved to the dark side, became a venture capitalist with a firm called GRP Partners.
I'm Ryan Scott, and my first company was a company called Net Creations, which I started back in 1995. As you can kind of tell by the name, back then all there was to do was to create the websites. There was nothing really worked beyond that point, and so we started creating a lot of software tools that people could use to promote their websites, and that which eventually turned into the opt-in email marketing industry. And so, the phrase 100% opt-in or double opt-in, all of these things were phrases that I coined way back in the day. So the double opt-in, confirmation process was something that we all use, but I felt it was a big threat with Amazon actually patenting this thing. So I patented the process and let it out there for everybody to use, so we can have an ethical direct marketing industry on the internet. And then my second company, which is the one I started about 3 years ago, is called CauseCast. The idea here is, I wanted to do something bigger and have much more of a social impact. So it's something that we call social entrepreneurship type business. The idea is to help businesses engage their stakeholders around causes, which in a lot of cases means nonprofits. We engage consumers through campaigns, for example, AARP or the Huffington Post. But we also engage employees with a platform that allows companies of any size to do volunteer days, dollars for doers, and donation platforms.
So the point of the panel tonight is, I think, really twofold. The first is to talk about how to go after a really big business, a multi-million-dollar business your second time around. But the first part of the discussion is really around what are the lessons that you learned the first time. And I think, Mark, you've been the most vocal about some of the pitfalls and mistakes you made in your first business, and you write about it a lot. And so I'd have you start by answering that question. But what I'd ask everyone else on the panel is, seemingly so from an outside perspective, all of your first businesses have been unbelievably huge successes and probably hard to top for your second business. But things always seem so much easier from the outside than they were on the inside. So as you were coming up, what were the things that were really hard and difficult and challenging? The main lessons that you learned that you're applying to your second business? And while they think about that, Mark, if you could talk a little bit about those lessons that you learned in that first business that you did.
So I will speak in the first person, but I will say that almost all the typical mistakes that I made, I see in many entrepreneurs, and I really am a big proponent of backing second-time entrepreneurs. I think there's a lot more realism, and you make a lot fewer mistakes. Starting with the easy stuff, I started in an industry that I wasn't passionate about because a bunch of VC buddies told me that there was a lot of market opportunity in it. And I had a friend who had the idea, and he was looking for someone to do it with him. And that's a terrible reason to do a business. And I spent the next 6 years of my life on it. As I like to tell people, I used to have to go to events where I would hear construction people and civil engineers talking about things like reinforced concrete, which I could give two shits about. So I had to pretend to care. So I started with that, and it all went downhill from there. I raised too much money. I ended up building too many products too quickly, so there's this notion of MVP now, but I overspec everything. We built 4 products at the same time, which you tend to do when your A round is $16.5 million. And so we hired people a bit too quickly and not as judiciously as I would have. And we tended to pound our chest, because I was pretty good at marketing, telling people what a great company we were before we were. And that created a lot of demand for our product. And we failed to live up to that hype that we created, and it was very hard to live up to that. When things got really tough, we searched around for anybody with a pulse to merge with and acquire and consolidate an industry. And I always say that that's what you do when you can't figure out your core business. And I see a lot of people doing that these days. It's like a rush to, I call it premature mergelation. So it's an industry term I call it.
I really like that.
I had it trademarked. No, it's like what you do, and it's so much sexier to want to go out and talk about acquiring companies than it is to try and A/B test your copy and see what converts better, or move your buttons around, or actually figure out how to make a business work. And then I'll say one last thing, and I'll shut up, Jason. But after all of that, I got a huge sense of realism. And we were weeks away from bankruptcy, and my biggest motivator was, and this is the truth, I just didn't want to go to my wedding unemployed, and I was engaged, and the date was close, so I knew I was going to find a way to make it work. And we went from 92 staff to 33 in 2 weeks, and that was fun. And by the time I sold the company, we were back up to 120. So we actually built a real company and did real things, and all the stuff I should have done the first time. Having been through that and getting financed at the last minute, I sort of saw myself as a Depression-era startup. And, we never lost that mentality. We were cheap as shit from then on in. And so when I see extravagance, when I see exuberance, when I see premature discussions of mergers, when I see people not focused on the nitty-gritty of making their businesses work, when I see people at every conference, I like to call them conference hoes, when I see them tweeting that one day they're in Miami and then the next day in New York and then in Chicago about how they're hanging out with P. Diddy or Jay-Z or whatever, I politely send them to Jason to fund, and the people who just are really looking to build real businesses are a lot more interesting to me.
So Ryan, one of the things that I think is the most compelling and interesting about your story, and I didn't even know all the pieces of it till just a couple of weeks ago, you took your first company public.
Yeah.
And how much money did you raise again?
None. Yeah. So we actually grew a profitable business from the beginning.
So can you talk about those, those first 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and how you transitioned a business where you didn't raise a single dime into a company that you took public?
I worked out of a spare bedroom in my partner's house, and we would have clients come over and sit on the edge of my bed while we showed them stuff. I have to kick my underwear underneath the bed. And just, taking, I was a developer, so I could write the code, and my partner was out there, selling this stuff. And so just not overgrowing it, which is, kind of interesting the second time around. When you have no money, you don't do anything like super crazy as far as, building too many products, although I was able to build a lot of products. But the second time around, since I took that company public, and then, but I owned half of it at the time I took it public, and then I sold it for all cash. So I ended up with a lot of money to start the next company. And you just very much like you were talking about, if you have too much money, and if you have nobody looking over your shoulder, you'll start to go in all kinds of crazy directions. And it's fine because, I wanted to figure out this market, which in a lot of cases didn't exist. But now we're at the point, 3 years later, where it looks like we've done a bunch of pivots, but we really are, doing what we always set out to do, which is to leverage, all the money and the power that businesses have in order to help nonprofits. It's just taken. We've ended up building a ton of really great tools for that.
So, Gil, what were some of the hardest things in the first business? What were the hard knocks? What were the? I mean, you've in essence created one of the most ubiquitous ad products in the entire world. But what were the really hard moments that you had when you thought to yourself, are we going to make it, and how's it going to turn out?
It was exciting, and in retrospect, you look at the roller coaster and you appreciate it, and now I'm excited about the roller coaster. But at the time, it's a long slog and a painful process and a heck of a lot of no's. And if you look back in the archives, you can see that we launched AdSense, I think, in 2000, and there's a reason why nobody used it from 2000 to 2002. That's 24 months of no customers. And it's because we couldn't find the back-end partners that believed in the technology and believed in the idea. And it was a lot of meetings and failed meetings with Alta Vista and with other companies that just saw the world in a certain way. So I think the learning there that is, I'm always in a continuous process of learning. It makes me think of Mark's blog about 50 coffees. I mean, it takes 50 coffees to make anything happen, maybe sometimes more than 50. I think the thing that I learned, I think I drew from when I was selling vacuum cleaners door to door as a sophomore after a freshman year of college, that you figure out what the ultimate prize is. In the case of AdSense, we knew it was large. You divide it by the number of meetings that it takes to win. Even if you're dividing it by 100 or 200 of failed attempts, you divide it. In the case of a Kirby vacuum cleaner, it was $1,200, and it took 10 one-hour presentations. You're getting paid $120 for a really difficult presentation. You got to earn that money. So every time you go out there, you got to assume that your model makes sense, that your vision makes sense.
How long did you sell vacuum cleaners for?
I think it was 6 weeks.
How many vacuum cleaners did you sell?
I sold 6 per week. I was really proud of myself.
You sold 6 per week?
And they're $1,200 each. Wow. So,
baller.
Yeah. And my mother would not let me take all the money I made. I made $1,200, and I wanted to buy a vacuum cleaner with that earning. Not let me. It was a damn good vacuum cleaner. You don't want to know what's in your mattress, folks. You do not want to know.
So what was one of the hardest moments you had with applied semantics? Was there a moment you thought that we weren't going to make it, and what was that?
I guess my leadership style is to be a consensus builder, and sometimes what do you do when there's absolute no consensus to be had? Things can break, and there's a lot of arguing, and you especially if you start a company with friends and family, it can be a painful process. But you have to persist, and you have to get to the next day, and you have to make a decision ultimately, or else nothing moves forward. So I think.
And did you raise money for applied semantics?
We did about $1 million angel round, and then we did a $5 million Series A.
And that was it. And then you sold the business. Great.
He was at a law firm, I was at a law firm, and every day we're like, there's got to be something better than this. So at lunch, we're like, well, the internet's kind of hot. This was like, back in 99, 2000. We're like, let's do something law online. And that's kind of the genesis of the idea. So we came up with this whole business plan. But back then, if you all remember, the internet was still relatively new to consumers. And to ask people very personal questions online, like give me your bank account information and your children's names and everything else to make a will and living trust, we just thought that, we needed somebody, attached to LegalZoom that, you might not necessarily like him, but at least it's not a fly-by-night company, right? So we came up with a list of all these lawyers that we thought would be a good face for the company. And the number one name on that list was Robert Shapiro, because he was just coming off the OJ trial, probably one of the most famous attorneys in the world at that point. And so we started asking around to everyone we knew. We're like, hey, do you guys know Robert Shapiro? And we weren't really in the right circle. And everyone said no. So one day, I called 411 information, and I asked for Robert Shapiro, the attorney in Century City. And they gave me his phone number. And this was like 10 o'clock at night, and I had my voice message written out and everything, and I knew exactly what I was going to leave him on his voice message. And I called, and I didn't know at the time, but he's a workaholic, and he's still a workaholic to this day. But he picked up the phone, right? So I called. He says, hello. I said, I'm calling for Robert Shapiro. And he says, this is Robert Shapiro. How can I help you? And the first thing I said was, Robert Shapiro, the attorney? And he said, yes, how can I help you? So, basically I said, well, I have a business idea I'd like to run by you. And the first thing he told me was, I'm not interested, right? Like it's a sales call, right? And then it's just something came over me, and I guess, when your back's against the wall and you have no other choice, and I just feel that weight, like, how do you know you're not interested if you don't hear me out? And then I think he heard the desperation of my voice or something, and he said, okay, you've got 2 minutes, right? And I've heard him use that line afterwards.
Which is
So
like
you got 2
$90
minutes.
in his billable hour, right?
Exactly.
I think, yeah.
And in those 2 minutes, dude, I just got off. I just this is what we're going to do. We're going to change the world of law. We're going to revolutionize everything. And at the end of it, he was just like, I hear hundreds of pitches all the time, but I actually really like this idea. Why don't you set up a lunch meeting next week and we'll get together? And that's kind of the Robert Shapiro story. And we got him attached after about 3 or 4 meetings over a course of 2 or 3 months. And he was attached, and then we thought we were going to raise a boatload of money because he said yes, right? And everyone was raising money at the time. But our very first venture capital meeting was the day that the NASDAQ crashed. Seriously, we knocked on the door of this VC, and he's just like, what the hell are you doing here? We're here to pitch you the LegalZoom.com idea. And he sat us down, and he said, you're never going to raise money for this, right? And it was like a real sobering moment. We're like, oh, right? we were to quit our jobs at the law firm, seriously, because we were so confident we were going to raise like $5 million. And then so we walked over to Benihana across the street, and we were eating our teppanyaki, and we're looking at each other like, should we go get our jobs back? And then, but both of us, we just looked at each other and we said, how much do you really, really believe this idea? And both of us said 100%. 100%. This is going to work. I mean, people just don't want to pay $300-400 an hour for an attorney. And so that's when we decided, screw it. Let's just raise whatever we can from our parents and get it started. And that's how it started.
And that was a $24 million round from your parents? Was that it? I can't remember. Was that? No. All right. So early on days in LegalZoom, because, that business, it took a while. We're in year 11 now of LegalZoom, right? 11 or 12. Well, talk about the early days. Were there any really tough times that you had? What were the real struggles that you had early on those first 2-3 years?
It was all a struggle, because when you have no money, and because we were poor, we were working out of my condo, like 6 of us, and no one was getting paid. I didn't take a salary for the first 2 years, neither did Brian, my partner. And we were paying our interns in DVD machines. And it was ridiculous. I couldn't even believe some of these people worked for us without getting paid. And we gave them stock options, and now, of course, they're like, woohoo, right? But so it was just tough because every dollar we had, it was so valuable. And I still remember our very first order that came in through using GoTo.com. We got an order, and we couldn't believe it was a real order. Right? And we called the customer, and we were like, hey, did you place an order on LegalZoom.com? And of course, we didn't put, when you put the order number, you're like, you don't want to put order number 1. So he was like order number 508 or something. But yeah, it was just a struggle, just wondering every day whether or not we were going to survive. And that went on for honestly 2 years. Every day we were like, God, are we going to get any orders today? Yeah, so it was a struggle because there was just no capital.
So let's talk about lessons learned. What were some of the most, and just open it up and we'll talk as a group, but what were the most important lessons that you learned in your first business that you either took to your second business or that you're now taking into your second business that you think is going to make a really big difference? What didn't you know then that you do know now, and what are you doing differently?
I guess one thing I would bring up is, so as a first-time entrepreneur, you don't really know a lot of the ropes. There's a lot of things that you're encountering for the first time, and there's a lot of people that want to be advisors, and there's a lot of terrific ones. The big challenge, though, is when you get conflicting advice from advisors that you do or are supposed to trust because of their reputation, and then what do you do? And it's easy to get stuck in that, and so at a certain point, you just have to kind of go with your instinct and believe a certain vision and kind of go with it and go fast and not get too slowed down. I think the second time around it's a little easier to just make decisions and move forward.
You're saying trust in your
yourself.
own, trust yourself. Okay. Other folks?
I might just add to that to say, Gil, you spoke about this idea of 50 coffee meetings, which, for me is a metaphor for constantly meeting people,
Can you expand on that in case people didn't read the post?
Yeah, that's what I was in the process of doing.
Mark has one of the most popular blogs around. Everybody's reading the blog, right? You should be if you aren't.
BothSidesOfTheTable.com.
Yeah. So anyway, 50 coffee meetings is a metaphor for constantly networking with people and constantly trying to take in information. And, I'm sort of a very curious person, so I like to meet with people and just ask questions and try to learn as much as I can. And even to this day, I still very much feel that way, like, mobile computing, I'll sit down even with our portfolio companies and I'll say, okay, when you submit to the App Store, what happens to your reviews? I notice that they get wiped out. Why do they get wiped out? Does that affect you? Does it matter if you have 150 reviews or 1,500 reviews? Have you tested whether or not you convert more? Does the text matter? Does your logo matter? And all of these, all the information's out there for you to find, but it takes 50 coffee meetings. And no, it's not literally 50. But it's just for curious people. And the concept I like to tell entrepreneurs is triangulation. Triangulation is a sailing term. And I don't sail. But it's, constantly taking multiple reference points to find your true direction, I guess, somewhat. And so for me, constantly taking in information to help you better make decisions, which you would do as a CEO, but not as many people do in the external markets. And then what I like to say to people is take in all this information and it's all conflicting, and in the end you have to go with your gut. And if you don't have a strong internal compass for decision making, then you probably make a better number 2 or number 3 than number 1, because almost all the decisions you're going to make are with incomplete information, where there is no right answer, where you get conflicting views, and in the end you just have to make a judgment, but make it with information. And I would say, with all due respect, Gil, like my observation of you in the last year has been, even though you say you've done it all before and you're hugely successful and probably have a strong opinion, I always hear you asking opinions. I hear it all the time. You're like, well, do you think I should do it this way or that way? Do you think I should maybe think about this way? And I know damn well you've asked 20 other people the same thing, but I think that curiosity to hear people's point of view, and in the end you're going to make up your own mind, I think it's very important.
So now as a venture capitalist, what are the biggest differences you see between someone that's on their second business versus someone that's on their first?
Well, I'll just maybe, and I won't tell tales out of school, but I'll talk about Dustin Rosen, who runs a company that I've invested in called Pose. It's a mobile app for sharing images and information about fashion and apparel. When I sat down Dustin, I actually invested before he launched his product, which kind of breaks a rule of mine. But I wanted to work with Dustin, and I really liked the idea. And I would sit down and I'd try to give him advice on when to ship product, what features should go in that, how soon we needed to get out the door, the kind of people we needed to employ, what we needed to do about marketing, how he needed to be open. And my analogy is kind of when you have a child, you want to tell them, look, you probably want to cut yourself off after 5 or 6 beers, but you might say that, but you know that they're not gonna. Or, this woman that you think you love or this man that you think you love, it's probably not going to be the one you end up with. Don't get too stressed about things. But people need to make their own mistakes and experience their own things, and you can tell people. But I've seen this so many times now as a VC, where I invest in an entrepreneur who hasn't done it before, and I try to tell them, one more quick aside, but it's related to this, is a company called Awesome, AWE.SM. Jonathan Strauss, first-time CEO, and I kept saying marketing matters. We have to get out and market. You've got an amazing product. We need to tell the story. Once you market, VCs will come in, customers will come in. It's really stupid, but people believe what they read in the press. And so I kept saying it, and it's against his tendency, and he kept holding off. And then finally we got to a point where he was almost out of cash, and I'm like,
I'm gonna fucking write the story if you don't write it. Like, we had to get this thing out there, and we put it out there, and then we had 3 VCs called in that week. We had 3 acquisition offers in less than 2 weeks, and all this demand started coming in, and he's just like, oh man, you were right. And it's almost like a father-son thing that I see, which is that's the second-time entrepreneurs. Once you've been through all these things, hiring the right employees, how much capital do you raise? Should you have a board of advisors? When do you do stuff in the press? Like, you have a really good internal compass for it, and it's impossible to have that unless you've done it before.
So to that point, Ryan, what was the biggest thing that you learned the first time around that you're now implementing in CauseCast?
I think I'm learning things the second time even more than the first time. So the first company, I was a CTO and co-founder. And so a lot of the CEO-related stuff was handled by my partner. Picked up a lot of it from her, but I wasn't running it. Now running it is a completely different story. So I had to learn a lot of things. There was times when I was saying the same thing about marketing. I don't get the value of this. But then as we started doing it, just a little bit of marketing, all of a sudden all this inbound starts to happen. Really listening to what the market has to say is critically important. Our first company, orders were just coming over the internet, so I could talk to people. It was easy. But now, we've got to go out and visit with clients, and if I just sent, our sales team and I wasn't going to these things, I wouldn't be learning, exactly what they want, especially in the context of what we can and should build. It really informs the strategy. So I think it's really, I'm still learning.
We waited way too long to bring in professional management, because for me, it's like, I came to this realization that I'm a startup guy. I'm not the best operator out there, right? And just knowing that, this time around, we got a CEO that I just hired actually, that's starting on September 6th. So I learned a lot faster this time because, again, I look around at almost 200 people already at ShoeDazzle, and I'm like, I'm not the best operator. It's like I like to get deals done. I like to come up with strategy and ideas and get things executed. But when it comes to actually, like, I hate board meetings. I fall asleep in board meetings. And everyone knows that, right? And it's just I just don't do well in directing big teams and structuring things. I'm really good with 5 people on a stealth project, or getting something started from nothing. But once it gets to a certain scale, I know that's not my forte, and truthfully, it's not even my interest anymore. It's like I'd just rather hand it off to people who could scale this from X to Z.
Gil, what are you very best at? I often ask this question, and I think I've asked it in almost every interview I've conducted. But from your standpoint, what are you very best at? What do you do better than all your other skill sets and then everybody else?
I think. Well, this is my second time around. I guess I like to think that I can pick the idea that's going to be important in 3 or 4 years that everybody doesn't understand today, and then kind of deal with the fact that nobody understands it yet. Launching some of these tools that apply semantics, and it's not me. It's also, I think it's equally about building a passion-driven team and attracting people that don't even quite fully understand the idea yet, but somehow seem to think that maybe I'm onto something. Kind of passes this. They sort of sniff that there's a big opportunity there and sort of want to attach themselves. And in the end, I definitely, within the applied semantics team, I don't take credit for discovering the AdSense opportunity. If anything, it was my brother in the audience, Eitan.
Eitan, where are you at? Good job, Eitan.
We had the core technology, but then ultimately, it's about finding the business development opportunities and figuring out which direction to go.
So maybe I'll ask the question differently. What are we not good at? This is the panel of seasoned people. What is it that you all don't do well now that you make sure other people do well, that you hire well for that? And do you try to get better at some of those things, or have you just come to terms with the fact that those aren't areas you're going to try to get better and you're going to hire for it now?
I've realized that I'm not operations very much the same thing. I'm not going to do day-to-day operations. It doesn't benefit anybody. But you do need to go in.
You actually told me 2 weeks ago you thought the office ran better when you weren't there, right?
Oh, yes. It runs much better. Yeah, thanks. Joe McGee's available for hire. All of a sudden. No, it does work better when I'm not there because I throw out a million ideas and it just confuses the hell out of people. So what I realized with the development aspect of things in the meeting we had yesterday, everybody, the sales side was way too close to the development side of things. And so they were wondering when things were going to come out. And so we're basically putting up a firewall. You should not know how the sausage is made. And you'll see, okay, here's what's out, here's what's out, here's what's out. So a lot of those, that same type of thing is what I'm setting up for, strategy and, operations. I'll set them up. But I need to ask people a lot of questions, but not necessarily change their direction all the time. So in the same way, I don't want them to see how the sausage is made because it's a confused jumble mess in my head until it gets down onto paper.
What are you not good at, Mark? What don't you try to be good at anymore?
Well, I just say to your earlier topic, the way you framed the question, management philosophy 20 years ago was to try and teach people to be better at the things where they have deficiencies. And I think over the last 10 years, maybe 15 years, that's really changed to say, don't try to be better at the things that you're not good at. Try to find other people to work with to compensate that, and really try to go deep at what you're good at. And as you know, I've been around long enough to come to accept that wisdom and really try to embrace what I'm good at and what I'm not. I have ADD, and it causes me to not sit well in meetings. It causes me to blurt out and call bullshit on things. That's not a bad
And tell random knock-knock jokes?
The point of the knock-knock joke was interrupting cow because you're an interrupting cow. But we talked about this before the event. I said last time I came up here, every time I tried to talk, you jumped in. But
Would you like me to give you a foot massage while you talk? Or what exactly are you expecting here?
It'd be useful. But short attention span, don't have patience for bullshit. When things drag on, it drives me crazy. And I'm already on to the next thing. So if I'm sitting in a meeting where people are dithering, I got to do something else. Like I can't do it. And I freaking hate board meetings. And I tell every entrepreneur, I hate board meetings. I'd much rather come to your office the day before, spend a couple hours with you, look at your product, talk about real issues. Board meetings mostly are places that VCs go to look smart in front of their other VC colleagues by saying meaningless things and asking you for updates on your business that they haven't kept in touch with. And I just don't have a lot of patience for that. So what I describe myself as, and as I've described this, a lot of other entrepreneurs have said similar things, which doesn't sound dissimilar from either of you two, is I'm a shaper. I'm not a completer finisher. And it's a trait of people with ADD, as I've learned. I think I'm good on ideas. I think I can shape the idea. I can get people excited about the idea. I can get people pointing in the right direction. I can get a deal started. I can go 10 miles deep on how it's going to work. And then it's kind of mostly figured out, and I just lose steam and I'm on to the next thing. If I don't have a completer finisher there, things don't finish. And so I'm like this in my personal life as well. My wife is, thank God, a completer finisher. And in both of my companies, I partnered with a completer finisher. At GRP, we have 4 partners. One of my partners is a completer finisher. And they know this about me, and I think it's very complementary in the way that we work together. And if any of you have the inkling that you might suffer from ADD, I would encourage you to read a book called Driven from Distraction, where it talks about the symptoms, it talks about how you act, and I think it makes you feel much better about the short attention span and it not being a debilitating thing.
Well, I will say for someone that's self-proclaimed with ADD, you write the most intricate, best blog posts that are insanely, I think, long and amazing. So we should all have ADD like you if we want to be writers. It'd be helpful. Actually, let's talk about that a little bit, because I think one of the things that's interesting to me, Mark, and I'd be interested to hear from each of you. One of the things that strikes me in each of, I would say, Mark, you and I tend to be a little bit more on the promoting side of CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs. And one thing I found about Gil, Brian, and Ryan is you are all very reserved and often don't want to be in the spotlight. And I had to kind of drag each three of you, in here, kind of kicking and screaming to do this. How important do you think it is, Mark, to, as a CEO, entrepreneur, founder, be able to drum up press? And how valuable have you found? I mean, you're probably one of the best-known personalities now as far as venture capitalist, thought leader and writer. Has that been helpful in finding deals and in helping you more successful in the goals that are important to you now?
Well, let me say this. I think as an entrepreneur at a company, someone within your company has to have that capability. So I tell people, and I got this metaphor from Seth Sternberg at Meebo. He said, short people hang out with short people. And tall people hang out with tall people. And it's kind of true. Like, we sort of hang out with people who are like us. And as a startup company, you need to do the opposite. You need to find people who complement you well. If it's not your forte to be the front man or out there in the press, I think it is very helpful as a company to find someone who is. And maybe it's a celeb like a Robert Shapiro or Kim Kardashian's worked really well to make somebody else the public face of the company. But I think that's pretty important. What I find with regards to blogging is my customer base is entrepreneurs and other VCs, and importantly, I tell this to people all the time, big companies, because I want to influence the way they think. So share a mind, can I shift the way they think? And I once wrote a short article where I mentioned Sheryl Sandberg, and 24 hours later, she sent me a thank you email. And I was pretty sure she didn't even know who I was. And so that's really important to me. But for businesses, I think they make the mistake, and I tell this to startups all the time, is don't blog to your buddies, don't blog to your brethren, don't try, like, if your business is about serving startups, fine. But if your business is about serving moms and selling them diapers or something, like talking about startup and raising venture capital as your public face, I think is kind of a waste and very narcissistic. Whereas for me, that's my customer base. So the example I give people is Mint.com. They blogged about personal finance, how to manage your money better, and it became the resource for people on that topic. Or Magento Commerce here in town in LA, Roy Rubin and his colleagues would blog about e-commerce systems, and they became the #1 searched site on information about e-commerce, even though they're a vendor. And so I think public face is pretty important. It doesn't have to be the CEO.
Okay. So talk about that from your perspective, because it doesn't seem like from your standpoint you've ever really spent much time in your professional career trying to be the front person yourself. You went out, got Robert Shapiro. Obviously, we all know that Kim Kardashian is in many ways the public face of ShoeDazzle. And you've made that model unbelievably successful, where it seems now a lot of other internet companies are looking to find personalities to help drive their company. Was that, just talk about that, and why is that important, and how have you made that work for you?
Well, for me, it was just, I don't really like speaking in public, truthfully. And Jason is right. He had to kind of drag me in here to talk to y'all. And I just don't see the point of it. I'd much rather just stay in the office and crank shit out, So for me, but I know how important it is. I know how important it is to have people know ShoeDazzle, to get the word out, to get the press out.
The interesting thing is the number of people who have said to me, I talk about ShoeDazzle all the time as like a model of LA success and what we want more of. And people say, oh, Kim Kardashian's company?
Yeah, exactly.
So every time anyone not familiar with tech or startup says that.
Yeah, and that's the way it should be. Because, honestly, we have a business to run, and I totally admire CEOs, actually, that could go out there and drum up all this press and excitement for their own business. But for me, that's just not my personality. Truthfully, I'd much rather just leave that to someone else and the PR firms to do, and just focus on building the product.
For what it's worth, I thought you would have been great in that Carl's Jr. ad, though. So, so I often like to ask questions in the negative, meaning if somebody came to you today asking for a job or pitching your idea to come in as an investor, what are the qualities that you see on a consistent basis that are the biggest turnoffs to you? So when someone comes and asks for a job, when they're talking about their business idea, when they're pitching potentially to get you as an investor, what are the most common mistakes that you're seeing people make that first time around? And Ryan, I know you've seen a lot of this because people have been pitching you a lot as an angel investor.
Well, I'll just say from the employee standpoint, I try to get them to trash their previous employer, and you're just amazing how many will do it. They take the bait every time. Like, oh, what happened here? Why did you leave there? And then you throw something in, just a little backhanded thing about their employer, their previous employer. If they're doing that, they're going to do that to you too, or you at least should assume that they're going to do it. VCs, from an angel investing standpoint, I really just was investing in people who just were, I don't want to use that word, mofos. Let's use that word. So, I mean, I invested in Tesla Motors because Elon is a mofo.
Badass.
He's a badass. There's a good word. Yeah. And I just knew that he will absolutely succeed, whether, if it kills him, he'll do it. And he's already running, 3 companies. So, that's it. I think Mark was probably going to agree with this. It's investing in the people.
Yeah.
But what are the mistakes? I mean,
Mistakes.
what are the things that, if you're not a mofo, right? Okay. Which many of us may not be yet, and we can't all claim to be Elon Musk.
We'll all get there.
How many angel deals did you do in the last 2 or 3 years?
About 10 or 15.
Okay. How many did you turn down?
Oh, lots of them.
50, I don't know, something like that?
Hundreds.
Okay, hundreds. So what were the common mistakes? Like, what were the common mistakes people were making other than you don't like the business idea?
So much naivete, especially with first-time folks. Like,
so let's talk about that. What does that mean? What do you mean naivete?
Well, they'll say things like, of course, all the charts and graphs are all bullshit. They're all completely made up. So you can just throw those pages away. You may as well not even have them in your deck, as far as I'm concerned. I have like a really clear vision of how it's going to work, but also the entrepreneurs need to really clearly understand that. And it's funny, was when I first started in business, this word was not a word that we got to use. Changing direction. Now it's pivot. And you can just throw this out. It's like, oh, it's okay. You can pivot. Yeah. And that's what all companies do, though. They'll pivot multiple times. And an entrepreneur not understanding that or being too wedded to his ideas, you always offer suggestions when you're looking at these things. And if they can't quite hear what you're saying because they're just so married to their idea, that's a huge warning sign.
So same for you, Brian. I mean, have the two of you started doing much angel investing? I mean, you must get approached for it all the time, right?
Yeah, I've done quite a few actually in the last 2 or 3 years. I've probably about 20 of them, about 20 angel deals. Nothing big, small little slugs here and there. But the one thing that just bugs me, if anyone comes and pitches me on an angel idea, when it's just not original. It's like, dude, create something original, right?
Have
Be
you
creative.
heard of this other one?
Yeah. It's like they all come to you and they're chasing.
Oh, come on, local
they're
deal for
chasing.
moms. That's original. It's like
No, I mean,
deals
seriously,
with
how
a
many
spin.
how many Groupon type deals have you guys all said no to? I say no to all of them.
Oh, yeah.
It's done, right? It's like people come and pitch me on shoe dazzle ideas every day. They're like, no, seriously. They're like, I'm starting the shoe dazzle for men's clothing, right? You want to invest? I'm like, why would I do that, right? But it's incredible that everyone they're chasing, and that gets back to.
What if
to
somebody
your point,
offered you?
actually.
What if somebody pitched shoe dazzle for legal affairs? Would that catch your attention?
if you want to start it. No, but it gets back to your point with true passion. It's like, dude, that's not your true passion. You're just chasing an idea. You know that the money's out there, and you're just going to do it because you think you could raise money. But if you come to me with an original, and the only angel deals I do are truthfully deals that I haven't seen before. Like, I haven't seen that yet, right? Those and a lot of times those don't work anyway as well, but at least they're trying.
And so, of the 20 deals that you did, how many were first-time entrepreneurs versus folks that had built some kind of company with any measure of success before?
I'd say probably half of them are just pure first-time entrepreneurs, and half of them have done something before.
And so that wasn't the driving factor for you. It was really
No.
whether the idea was there and whether you felt like they were passionate about it.
No, it wasn't just the idea, though. The idea gets you over the hump, right? But then you just really got to spend time with the entrepreneur.
And I really want to drive this point home because one of the things that I most often hear at events like this is folks come up to me and they say, well, I don't know how to meet investors. And I know, Mark, you've talked a lot about this and you write about it and say, if you can't get a qualified introduction into an angel or venture capitalist, you suck. You're not worth meeting. So of the 20 folks that to Ryan, Gil, I won't quite put you in the category. I know you do a lot of angel investing, but just because you're VC, I'm going to exclude yours for a moment. But how many of the folks that you've done angel deals with? And so, Mark, same question to you. Did you know these people? Did you have some kind of relationship with them, or were they people that got introductions to you, or cold called you at 10 o'clock at night? How did you actually get to know the people that you ended up investing in their businesses?
I think most of them didn't know that I was an angel investor. So it's just I'm always out meeting people. They're always out meeting people. If they're not always out meeting people, they're not somebody to invest in anyway. And then you find out about their idea, and you're like, that's pretty cool. By the way, I'd love to take a look at your materials. I think that's a kind of a more natural way about it. I mean, I'm not a VC, so people are not contacting me out of the blue. And I do get stuff over LinkedIn because people know, but those are all garbage.
What about you, Gil?
Yeah, so I like to answering the question about mistakes. It's not so much about mistakes because it's really every investor has their own way of looking at these things, and so I have my own filter, and I've done a lot of angel deals. I wouldn't consider myself a professional angel. You kind of know what you like when you see it, but there's definitely some things that turn me off. I don't like it when people think that their idea is too original, because my view is no idea is original. It's kind of like art. It's just mixtures of other ideas that are out there, and that can't be what really propels your success. It has to be all these other things, your drive or the technology or your marketing prowess. Patent, especially for an internet idea, talking about your patent is a turnoff for me. I guess I like it when people try to bring in one technology people into the founding team that's driven by equity, and not to see it as an afterthought of a cog that they can place on the team. Those are some of the things that I look for, and certainly the team.
This is one other thing, if I could add. These startups that come in with all these VPs. I don't know why you have all these VPs already when you're just raising money. Like, where's the people that are actually going to execute this stuff? And developers are really, really important. And most of us are all doing something that has to do with software.
So if I could offer one piece of advice rather than, maybe it's based on something that I hate and saw today. I had 2 pitches today, and I wrote about this on my blog. If you search for it, it's called A Tale of 2 Pitches. And I talked about 2 different people who had come in on the same day, approaching their pitch in a very different way. And the same thing happened again today. I had these, I met the most amazing guy today, so blown away. 17 years old.
Wow.
And has already built a profitable company. He's on his 3rd company. He started his first at 12. And by the way, you hear people say that all the time. And I sold baseball cards or whatever.
I did sell baseball cards.
Yeah,
And vacuums.
I did. I sold baseball cards too. But no, legitimately, he's like, well, my specialty is optimizing media buys on banner advertising at lower rates with better behavioral targeting. And I'm like, fuck, this guy's like only 26. And so my partner says, how old are you? And I'm like, oh, can you ask that? How old are you? And he said, 17. And you know what he said next? This is true. He said, do your parents know you're here? And the guy lives in Boulder, Colorado. He didn't graduate high school. He lives on his own. He's partnered with a guy who's 27. They're co-founders. Just phenomenally talented and really knew what he was doing. And so my lesson, that's not the lesson. The lesson is we just had this wonderful dialogue about his business. And he presented his ideas of what's working and why he's focused where he is and how the business is going to evolve. And the whole room was like in a discussion, debate. Yeah, but I don't think it's going to work this way. I say, well, with all due respect, we're doing, and it's a great debate. The best pitches are discussions. or debates. And then I had another guy who came in today, and hopefully he's not in the room. Maybe he is. Are you here? Just like on and on and on and on. And I'm like, fuck, I don't really care about this. And you're just going on. And what I always try to do is, this is my ADD problem, but what I always try to do is politely steer them in the right direction. And I'm like, okay, well, listen, we're a little pressed for time, so maybe you should talk us through the economics of your business. And like whatever I did, it would just be 20 minutes of this. Like maybe it's not 20, it felt like 20 minutes, but like, and so boring, and never stopped to ask if we were getting it, or to ask us a question, or to try and bring us in and get us involved. When you're doing all the talking, you have no idea what the person across from you is thinking. I call it crocodile sales, big mouth, small ears. And you really have to be careful about crocodile sales. And it's just on and on and on. And honestly, this is literally what happened and I apologize if you're in the room, but I won't mention your name. But I said to I brought the founding partner of our firm, Eve, to the meeting because the guy's from out of town. And I'm like, Eve, I know that you came out of your other meeting for this, and, I think you've got enough. Why don't you go ahead and leave, and I'll stay in the I just felt so bad for dragging in my partner to wait through this shit that, where am I going with this?
You're just venting.
But you're saying this person might actually be here today? You're like, this scumbag, this maroon.
No,
Are you here? I'm sorry.
No, what blows me away is this person has done 2 or 3 interesting businesses, highly referenced. I actually don't take anything away from, it was a terrible meeting if you're here. But but the product concept and my belief in his ability to execute still remain high. I just happened to know him before the meeting, and I brought in my partner to hear how interesting this was going to be. Yeah, you got to make them discussions. You got to get people talking. It's got to be interactive. You've got to listen and not be dogmatic about your idea, because you're there to learn. And even if I'm wrong, at least take the data point. But if you're just going to be defensive and tell me why I'm, like you're not even listening to the feedback, probably not someone I'm going to work with. Take the idea, mix it in the pot. If you don't agree with it later, that's okay.
So let's spend a little bit of time talking about the current climate, and then what we'll do is we'll open it up for a couple questions, and then we'll break the room down a little bit, and we've got some food coming. So let's talk about the current climate. This is, by all accounts, a crazy time. Simultaneously we have the highest unemployment rate and people struggling to try to even find minimum wage jobs, while in the tech sector, people are raising tens and 20s and hundreds of millions of dollars, $1 billion valuation. So, Gil, both you and Brian have raised big rounds for your current businesses, much bigger than you raised at any point, early on in your first business. And Ryan, you've self-funded your current business, haven't taken any money. Just talk to me about your thought process around this, and then, Mark, maybe round out the discussion of seeing both sides, both having to invest in companies at these competitive, crazy valuations, and having been an entrepreneur where you took a lot of money. What's your thought process around it? Are you going for broke here, where you're just going to raise whatever you can and go for building that $1 billion business that's going to go public? Is that what excites you these days?
No, definitely not. It was the money that we just recently raised through Andreessen Horowitz. It was a $40 million round, but we weren't looking for capital at the time. Honestly, they just came in, started talking to us, and threw a valuation over the fence that we could not say no to. And if the money, and I'll tell every entrepreneur that, if the money is that fucking cheap, take it, right? It was almost silly for us. So
But you're committed to really making Shoe Dazzle, a public company, a brand that's going to last forever. You're not trying to sell it for $100 million. You want to really go for it.
Oh, absolutely. I didn't start Shoe Dazzle to sell it for $100 or $200, $300 million. We started it to build something big. We think that we created an entirely new e-commerce model that's working well, and so why not shoot for the fences, swing for the fences.
So that was the advice that I was given by Reid Hoffman many years ago. He said, Jason, whenever you have an opportunity to raise money, raise it. Yeah. And it seems to me that there's definitely a lot of sense in that, but maybe sometimes not. And I'm sure, Ryan, with your background, you could have raised any amount of money at any time, but you've chosen not to yet. So Why not? I mean, I'm sure somebody would write you a blank $20 million check just to go for it.
Where is this person? No, my plan is to raise when it's necessary to raise. And with my first company, not having taken any venture capital but building a profitable business, my partner and I, we'd go to the bank every week, and we were subchapter S. We had to take the money out. We were going to be taxed on it anyway, and we were pulling out $200,000 a week. And we're like, this is really great. I don't know why I need to take money. But then our competitor went public. I thought, oh, shit. All right, so then we went public right after that. Going public without venture capital is not that easy. And we paid a company a couple $1 million. It turned out to not be the best company to go public with, but paid them the money to go public. Did it, and it was
that company here as well
success.
too. Is they were from this company?
I don't think they're around anymore. They really sucked. Never. I didn't really understand venture capital at first, to begin with, and I only knew how to build a profitable company. So second time around, I really wanted to do a lot of experimentation to see what would work. Didn't want people. I know there's so much. There can be a lot of value to getting the relationships from venture capitalists and the advice from venture capitalists, which I didn't get to take that much advantage of. But I really wanted to see what was going to work in the market and help build a market that didn't exist yet. So having the money to do that allowed us to try a lot of different things, make a lot of mistakes, start a product line, and cut it off. That's I think harder to do. I suspect anyway with venture capital. Now, though, that we're moving to, basically we've used all of our clients' money to build all of the infrastructure because we built it for them, but it's also for us. And so now as we're releasing more, less custom and more scalable products, as we start to see traction with those, in order to take all that stuff to the next level, I will go and do a raise, but I'm going to have to give away a lot less of the company. And when I took the first one public, again, I owned 50% of the company. When we sold 20% to the public, but it came out at $200 and some million. If I had owned 10%, that would have been it'd be a different story. So I don't know. I guess it's just being stubborn and wanting to be able to make a lot of mistakes.
And Gil, what was your thought process around? Because your company, is it still pre-revenue?
We're generating revenue now.
Okay.
So your question was around. I'm forgetting exactly what the question is, but I have the answer.
Just your thought process around
Right.
raising a large round this early on.
Okay. Well, I was thinking a little bit about, there was a question around, is it the right time to start a startup? I tend to be a great optimist around, there's a lot of discussion around, is there a bubble? Are there too many people starting companies? Are there too many incubators? I tend, especially this go around compared to 10 years ago, the dot-com bubble, there's people questioning whether there's a bubble happening today. I'm seeing amazing new opportunities, new models, disruption of real businesses, and the companies that are doing these aren't necessarily the ones that are hugely capitalized. There's new ideas that are disrupting banking or real estate, not just e-commerce. To me, these businesses are fundamentally where the great innovation is happening. It's because you're drawing these brilliant people, risk-taking people, and I just see plenty of opportunity for great things. It's still not a huge percentage of our GDP that's going into seed rounds. So to me, I think it's really exciting.
So Mark, to Brian's point, having been on both sides of the table.com, if you can get money at a good valuation, do you take it every single time?
Well, docstock.com. Most conventional wisdom, of course, is not accurate. And that makes life really hard because you read all this stuff online telling you what to do, and most of it's wrong. And I'm going to put a little asterisk around what you said, Brian, is for the most part, I actually disagree with what you're saying, with the exception of in your case. And I'll explain why in a moment. I always say when the hors d'oeuvre tray is passed, take two, but don't take the whole tray. And put one in your pocket and eat one. And the advice...
Doesn't that mess up your pocket, man? I don't know, really... What if it's like a ahi tuna or something?
Moo. No, that was good. That was a good comment. That was good. I appreciate that. It moved the story along. And so the analogy is this, is I see entrepreneurs optimize too far in either direction. On the one hand, I see a lot of people saying, I don't really want to raise money now because I'm going to be worth a lot more in 6 months from now, and I don't want to face the dilution. And sometimes it works out, and that's awesome. The reality is, a lot of times it doesn't. The extra capital, when you have a down market, is very useful. And the advice, especially if you're a first-time entrepreneur, can be very useful in helping you avoid pitfalls. So I say, like, if you're going to take, and let's just make up number, 18% dilution for raising, let's make it up, $750,000 or $1.25 million, whatever it is, it's not dramatically going to change your economics as a startup founder. And I think dramatically, if you get the right investors, increase your odd of being a 1 rather than a 0. And I think that's important. And I see people over-optimize. By the way, first deal that I've seen in this cycle, I saw pulled today. A mega round, investors pulled out their term sheet 3 weeks from closure today.
Why?
NASDAQ was down 5.22% today. And it's down, I don't know, I need to look at it, somewhere between 18 to 20% over the course of the last 3 or 4 weeks. It is reminiscent of 2008. It is reminiscent of 2001, 2002. And I like to say that when capital dries up, it gets constipated.
So I want to put an asterisk to what I said earlier too. Raise the money when it's cheap, if you could afford that. But also act like you're never, or just know in your head, you got to convince yourself and your entire team, you're never going to raise capital again. You got to make that money last, whether it be a $500,000 round or a $40 million round. Just have it in your head. The money's going to dry up. It's never going to come around again.
But let me explain the troubling thing about cheap capital, okay?
Yeah.
Is if you get ahead of yourself on valuation, which is the definition of cheap capital. Let's say that inherently companies at your stage and with your risk profile and your amount of traction, let's make up a number, say would be worth $6 million pre-money valuation you can raise to. If you raise at $11 million, it's not the end of the world. It's not so big. I call it the top end of normal. If you raise at $25, $35, $40 million on that round and you don't grow into your valuation, you're fucked.
Oh, absolutely.
A
And I
correction.
think that's happening all over right now.
And it's happening now, and it happened in
all over.
08, and I kept telling people, like little kids, not to drink too much alcohol. I kept saying, be careful about getting ahead of valuation, and today, first sign I saw a deal pulled. And there will be more if the stock market continues to drop. It's the nature of the cycle. The other problem, so one other problem with raising at too high a price, e.g. raising cheap capital, is, I'll use this idea of, let's say you can raise $10 million at a $50 million pre. And your business is nascent and hasn't really proven it. Well, it may have been that if you raised a little bit less capital, and we all know being capital constrained forces more innovation, right? Like I was lazy, undisciplined in my first company. I had too much capital. My second company, I only raised $500,000 before I sold. You take optionality off the table because at 60 posts, you have one outcome, and that is huge. And that's different for you now because having had the LegalZoom success, Shoe Dazzle, you could go into it with a different set of expectations. But I see entrepreneurs all the time that have fundamentally altered the course of their life by raising $1 million at a $6 million post, selling their company for $18 million, which didn't end up being a huge return for those investors. It's a good return. But entrepreneur might put $4 million in their bank account, and that could change a lot of people's lives. And I believe a little bit in optionality on your first company. And if you're all in and you don't give a shit about the optionality, then I get raising at cheap capital.
So
I think I add one thing. I would just not use me as an example for anything. This guy has really good things to say.
So if we can do this, can we turn up the house lights for a moment? And then Tucker, I think's got a microphone. And Buck, if you want to come around and grab this one, because we'll probably need two, and we'll turn back on my lav. Let's take a couple questions from the audience. We'll get the lights back up. Maybe get a little house music on. The thing I always wonder then, when you say that though, Mark, is your wisdom conventional wisdom that people should not listen to, or unconventional wisdom that they should listen to?
It's very meta.
It is. All right. Questions. Right over here. I think Todd. Here you go, Buck. And if we could turn back on the loft, please.
Hey guys, good to meet all of you guys. Question is, from your first or your second?
When you get the mic, just for everyone, say your name and what company you're with. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Todd Staples with StealthAuto.com.
Cool company if you're looking for auto parts.
Thanks, Jason. I'm wondering if your reason why you've done what you've done has changed from your company 1 to your company 2. Like, what has been your real motivation for your first one? Like Brian, you said it was just to get away from your job, and your next one, I'm curious, like how your why has changed.
Honestly, with LegalZoom, it was just an idea that we just had, and we started. It wasn't that I was necessarily even passionate about being a lawyer. So even though I say, hey, the entrepreneur should be passionate, I was, I guess, more passionate about leaving the legal field than working for a law firm. But it was just the right opportunity at the right time, in my opinion. But for me, I've always just inherently been more attracted to selling fashion, truthfully, or selling just consumer goods as a whole. And so I saw the opportunity that laid it in front of us, and we took it.
Cool. Anyone else's why changed?
I'll say my first company, just building stuff for the internet and kind of just following the opportunities as they came up. Finding that it was much harder to promote a website than build a website, ended up with promotional tools and ended up into the opt-in stuff. And I saw, holy shit, this really works, and let's take it as far as we can. But after I sold the company, I took 5 years off, which is really hard to do when you're 30 years old. You can do it for a couple months, but then you start to turn into a crazy person. And so the why really became, I wanted to do something big, but I wanted to do something that was going to have a big impact. And being involved with a lot of different nonprofits, giving them money or doing fundraisers, things like that. It was all, I just thought it was just kind of not that effective. And having a technology background and a business background, I thought there's really an ecosystem, a new ecosystem that can be created here, where everybody wins. The nonprofits, the causes that they support, the businesses and the consumers. I mean, it just has to involve like 5 or 6 different groups. But if you put them together in the right way, I thought that not only could it be profitable, which is absolutely essential for anything to continue, but it could, hopefully by leveraging the power of all these businesses, create massive change. And so that's really, the whole thing is about a why. But, it is rooted in making a profit.
Gil?
I was just going to say, I guess for me, the why is kind of consistent in the sense that I just believe deeply in the fact that data is going to drive good decisions, whether it's computers making them for you or people, and that the inefficiencies of the world can be reduced, and it's just going to end up helping alleviate poverty and help people in general. The specifics, I guess the second time around, it didn't have anything to do with the layoff. The first time I was working at Silicon Graphics, and there was a layoff, and I was the big mouth. You might not believe that, but like within an IT organization, I can be the rebel.
Yeah. What does that mean exactly? What's the IT rebel?
Right. I think the other guys wanted all data to be on Linux, and I thought we should move forward to relational databases. I think that it kind of made me unpopular.
No, you didn't.
Smackdown. So I got in my car that same day. Well, I guess it was actually that I refused to live anywhere in the United States. That's a different story. I was trying to get them to send me to Switzerland, but
I thought maybe they just didn't vacuum enough.
Yeah.
For you.
But I jumped in the car. I drove down to L.A. little did I know that when Google acquired us, I'd get moved right back into that same building. But anyway, Google bought the Silicon Graphics.
Got it. All right, let's take some other questions. So we got over here. All right, no room diversity over there. Please stand up.
Hi, I'm Marcy Orogo, and I'm from Silver Seeker. I'm hoping other people have this problem. I'm getting to the point where I'm going to run out of my own money and will need to ask for some, if anybody else is also having that same problem, so it's relevant. You guys talked about, or Mark, I think you mentioned the right investor. Probably when we're just starting up, and it's really exciting if anybody wants to give you money, any amount. So how do you stop yourself and know what is the right investor?
That's a good question.
I think there's a stack rank of the best investor early stage. Number one is an entrepreneur who has made a bit of money in a similar field to you. So that's kind of like the top for me. The second is just general entrepreneurs, but will have some resonance with what you do as an entrepreneur. The next layer down is generally wealthy people who would leave you alone. And then I get into where people start, which is the wrong stuff. So for me, the bottom of the stack is friends, families, and fools. And because they have very unrealistic expectations about the likelihood of a return, and it makes for very awkward Thanksgiving dinners. And almost certainly you won't return money to them, and it's nothing against you. So I'll just say generically, most startups don't return money. Even successful ones, the bottom of the stack, the early investors usually lose their money or barely make it back. And then a stack up from there, from friends, family, and fools, is lawyers, dentists, doctors, whatever. I mean, you really don't want to raise money from lawyers generally, or doctors, or if they're corporate lawyers and they understand the startup game, I would raise money from those people. So someone like Stubbs Alderton or Dave Young at DLA Piper, if they're putting in money, they really get it. They understand what they're doing. But doctors, dentists, real estate professionals have very unrealistic expectations of that investment and the time involved, and probably are not going to be that useful in introductions or debating your business.
Okay. Any other folks? Who are the best investors? I mean, these guys are all good investors. If you can get them to give you money, I'd say that's a pretty good start. So anyone on this panel would be pretty good. Just by way, because I know, how many folks here are in the process or will be soon of raising money? Okay. If you are, and Mark, you can stay seated, but if you are in the audience and you're an angel investor or venture capitalist, will you please stand up for a moment and raise your hand? I know there's more. I asked you guys earlier.
No VCs.
They're not suckers.
They're hiding.
I know they're going to be attacked.
Really? Really?
No.
I'm going to find you all. I'm going to take your emails and phone
fact-
numbers. Thank you.
In fact, Paige Craig got up
Who
and
just
walked off
snuck
just
out.
as you were saying that. I know Eitan back there. He's written a few checks. Come on.
Look at these
If you've done any angel investing in the last 2 years, just raise your hand.
Kelly, Purdue,
All right. You all are a bunch
Ryan
of wussies.
Bourne.
All right. By the way, one introduction I forgot to make. Need we stand up for 1 second? And then who are the other cyber coders here? Where are the rest of the cyber coders team? One of the most common questions, cyber coders people, stand up for a second. And Neetu loves the spotlight. Neetu, stay standing. Jeez. One of the most common questions that we often get is, how can I find developers? Cybercoders is a recruiting firm. I've never met a recruiting firm I like except for Neetu and Cybercoders. They've helped us hire every single one of the developers that we've pretty much brought in. If you're looking for tech talent, either as a finance company or just someone that can help introduce folks out of the goodness of their hearts, go talk to Neetu and her team, because they're, for my money, the best people at helping connect business folks with tech talent. So, all right, let's keep taking a couple more questions. Other questions we got? Want to do it over here? Okay.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Bell. I'm the founder of Clean Bee Baby. It's an eco-friendly cleaning service for strollers and car seats. Not tech, but high growth. I just launched 4 months ago. My question is, thank you. So I'm constantly battling between the minimum viable product and the perfectionism. I have an MBA. I want to do everything the right way. So I'm wondering what you guys think are the areas where you can, get something to market as quickly as possible, even if it's not perfect, versus places where you cannot cut corners at all.
Brian, do you want to take the first pass at that?
Sure. I would say that in everything that I've done at LegalZoom or ShoeDazzle, as long as it passes my own internal tests of quality, I guess I'm more like the Microsoft way of releasing things. I just kind of get it out there and try to fix it later. So for you, I'm so sorry. I forgot Microsoft. They've really changed and improved.
Once again, hey at DocStock. I'm a fan of at Microsoft. At Bismarck.
No wonder you don't like speaking at events.
Let's leave this up here.
For us, it's just, if the product is just about there, because look, everyone wants a better product, right? You could spend years and years developing the perfect product, and then it'll never get released, and you run out of money and you're done. You got to get to a point where you're happy with it, you can release it and feel proud of it, but just know that as you continue to ramp, you constantly innovate and make the product better.
I think one thing, and we don't do it exactly like this anymore. But we used to call it beta testing on the public, and but really, what should be done now is you beta test on a group of beta testers, not everybody. But you really don't know a lot of cases what's going to happen with your software until it's actually out there in the hands of the users. And so what we're trying to do with products that we're just about to release is we get a few clients on board who are willing to work through all the bugs. And really the value proposition to them is like, this is awesome for you, it's awesome for us, but you get to help define the product. And their input is going to be invaluable because again, you can't sit in a room just with your employees and assume that you know what the customer wants.
Yeah, I was struck by some presentations made by Dave McClure, Eric Rees, talking about lean startups and starting out and how the worst thing in the world is ambivalent customers. So if you have somebody that hates your product, that's actually not bad. That's second best. And the kind of feedback that you're going to get is incredibly important. So you're not going to get that unless you get it out.
Okay. I think we've got time for about 1 or 2 more questions, so we'll go from there. Buck, I think we've got some folks here in the front. It's coming around with the microphone.
Thank you. John Cristani, National Positions. I was just wondering how much of your guys' company's success relied on some sort of X factor beyond traditional marketing methods, such as like pay-per-click or cold calling, and how do you nurture that?
So you're defining an X factor as maybe something around like timing or luck or good fortune of something that's going on in the market?
Yeah, buzz, grassroots, just awareness.
I think you build a lot of that stuff into it intentionally. Yeah, luck is really just showing up. Be everywhere all the time. That's what I would say about that. So you could say, I met this guy, and that all of a sudden made everything happen. But if you were not out meeting people, you would not have met that guy.
Or you could call 411.
Well put.
No,
You want to
I just real quick on that issue. You just got to be very, just to your point, Ryan. You just kind of know what's going on out there. Meet as many people as you can, understand what everybody's working on, know what's working today. Because I'll give you a perfect example. Like I said, LegalZoom was one of the first advertisers on GoTo back in the day. We really grew with it, but the only way we found it is by knowing everybody around and hearing, hey, this Idea Labs thing, they just launched this thing called GoTo, you guys should give it a try. That's how it happened. And even today with ShoeDazzle, pay-per-click doesn't work at all for ShoeDazzle, and the reason for that is because no one's searching for Shoe of the Month Club, right, or whatever it is. And we actually gave it a test, and it was just miserable. And the price per clicks for shoes taken by Zappos and Nordstrom's and everybody else is too hard to compete. So you look around at what's going on, and yes, it's Facebook, right? And it's Twitter or whatever else is a good social platform that you could attach to and utilize at the time before everyone else starts using it. Facebook actually is kind of done now too, is pretty efficient already in our categories, but you just have to look around at the tools available to you, and the only way you're going to know all the tools is by knowing everything going on.
Oh, if I can add one other thing, it's another quip, but keep your friends close and your enemies closer. So again, about being around in the marketplace and know what's going on, but have good relationships with the people that, if you can do this, if you can get away with this, have good relationships with the people who you think are your competitors. Until you've released it, they don't really know that they're your competitors anyway. And if you can, which kind of goes to another thing, which is radical partnership. And the more you partner with other companies, that's gonna help you kind of get through things. They're gonna be talking to people. They're gonna be referring to people. If you're providing some value to lots of different websites, you've got other stakeholders involved than just the people in your company and just your your clients.
So on that note, a lot of us here are, I'd say most of us are going through the first round. And like I said in the beginning, I mean, every single one of you is someone that I've looked up to and respected for a long time. I go to each of you for advice and counsel. And I think one of the things that's most impressive to me is that you've not only been successful in your first ventures and then moved on to your second, but just the generosity of spirit you have and the kindness and helping everybody out. And I can honestly say that, I aspire not only to be as successful as each of you in business, but just like you in general, because you've each given back a lot and just been so generous with your time. And I just want to say a very big thanks to everyone on the panel here for coming out here tonight.
It's pretty clear that Jason has put together the event in Southern California that you have to be at. If you're in the tech, networking, entrepreneurial, startup, any of that, this is the place to be, to meet people, to learn from great entrepreneurs who have done it before.
I love the LA tech scene and coming to see all of the great speakers. I read Mark Suster's blog all the time, so it's really exciting to actually see him in person and then reconnect with contacts that I've met at other startup events, as well as meet their contacts. So it's just kind of a way to broaden your network slowly but surely over time.
I was really impressed with the quality of the panelists, because these are guys who have done it successfully, and they were really much more open than you normally see people on panels and talking about what they're doing and why they do it.
Really impressed with the practical advice that was offered and hearing these stories of how people started out, oftentimes just out of their bedrooms and with really small teams, is always really inspiring and exciting.
I know a lot about DocStock. It's a great organization. He's put together a great team. He's put together a great brand, and it's very clear what the message is. Be the premier online place to store, hold your documents, sell your documents, document marketplace. I think you're doing a great job at it.
I love DocStock.
Yeah. Why?
I have my own business, and when you have your own business, you need a structure. I use DocStock to my documents, to gather ideas, to write my contracts.
I've always been amazed at the kind of quality of documentation that I've seen that you publish that I don't find elsewhere.
They've always been great, and it's great to see how they've grown more and more, and the content always increases in value. You always get a great amount of information from it.
The LA tech space is something that's really exciting, and DocStock is definitely, particularly with events like this, really a hub of that and a great example of that.
It's such a resource full of information, and it's perfect for entrepreneurs, definitely.
Definitely we'll come back for the next one.
I would love to come back. I love to meet other entrepreneurs. It's like the most excited, crazy people that you'll meet anywhere in LA, and risk takers are, we're a different breed, so it's really fun and exciting.
You won't be able to drag me away from the next one.